Now we are going to have the last part of the session today, talking about how we can find solutions, discussing about things that we have been learning during last 5 parts, and see how we can use those strategies to understand how brain would process things and find solutions in a way that sometimes is hidden to us. There is a sort of what we call meta-analysis. Meta-analysis. So combining different studies and reporting what they have reported during problem solving in something like a brain map. And as you can see here, this is a frontoparietal map. These areas are in the frontoparietal areas. And the systematic review that has been done by Nagavi and Nieberg, and those who know Dr. Nagavi, he is from Tehran University of Medical Sciences. It goes back to 2005 when he was in Sweden, I think it was in Umeå. He was doing some studies there. And this study is being published then, discussing about, okay, it seems that most of the studies that are reporting kind of the process of problem solving, they are reporting activations within the frontoparietal areas. And obviously attention, working memory, as I told you, memory is going to be critically important. And then what we call conscious perception, in terms of understanding what is happening to this system and trying to use those resources in an active way to be able to solve problems. And in reality, with what we discussed before, this is the atlas that we reviewed before. Do you know what is the name of this atlas? Anyone who could remember? Just write it down in the chat space. Now you are getting to an expertise level to be able to understand those atlases. That is cool. That is cool. Yes. This one is your atlas. That those who have done their homeworks, they know the atlas really well. So your atlas, and in your atlas, if you remember, we discussed about frontoparietal part. This is the frontoparietal part, and we call that executive control network, ECN. This one, ECN. ECN. And we discussed before that there are some temporal side to ECN as well. Okay, and this is the U atlas that we discussed about before, and some other kind of areas like what we call default mode network that we discussed about before. But it is quite interesting that people realize over a time that sometimes when they are trying hard to solve a problem, so they are bringing in all executive functions that they have, all future episodic thinking processes that they have. They bring all those processes involved in the process of solving the problem. They cannot solve the problem. So they just feel that there is an impasse. There is a dead end. They just cannot solve the problem. And they work harder. They kind of do lots of mental effort to be able to solve the problem, but they cannot. And then they go for taking a showers, or they do their meditation, or they walk, or they run. And in a single moment, they just feel, aha, I found the answer. That is the answer. That is the way that I can solve the problem. And this is what we call Eureka Moment, or aha moment. Eureka in Greek, it means, aha, I just found it. And this is exactly that Archimedes had when he basically found the kind of the flotation rules when he was in the kind of Roman bath, when he was kind of experiencing that kind of flotation there, and how that the flotation is working in terms of the amount of the water is being displaced by putting that item inside the water and the kind of the mass of that water. So those equations. So he basically found that aha moment in the kind of bathtub, And also, there are many other Eureka moments, a very famous Eureka moment, or even the Eureka moment that, the famous guy, I'm sure that you know the Eureka moment. What was that? Who was that guy with the Eureka moment? So Newton found the gravity rule not in the lab, not behind his desk. He found it when he was laying down in the garden or something like under an apple tree, and he was enjoying his time there, and he found the problem. So you can see that people can find things not when they are in their executive control network mode, but when they are just relaxing outside without trying to solve the problem. And that is surprising, that why people get more creative and solve the problems in these moments. People try to ask people in terms of their aha moments and their experiences that they have with aha moments. They realize that there are 5 components to aha moment. One is what they call impasse, in terms of people are in a position that they feel that there is a dead end, there is something that they cannot solve. The aha moment happens suddenly. They find something like a certain solution, so they are certain that the solution is there. They are surprised that, I found the answer, so it is something that is surprising. And there is quite an emotional experience associated with that. So it is related to emotion. And the emotion could be positive or negative. So it is not always positive. Sometimes you just find the solution and say, oops, I just failed because I realized that was the solution, but I made the wrong decision. But it is right now, it's really late. Go back and just clean up the things because it is too late. So it could be positive or negative emotion associated with that aha moment. But people realize these things are going to be major components of the aha moments. And people rated that. It's quite interesting that even when they rated today or something like 4 weeks after today, they realize that it's something like a really reliable rating. So people report that as something like reliable. And probably this one, the impasse was lower in terms of the rating compared to others. But most of the people would say, okay, it is always associated with the level of emotional experience when they find that aha moment. People try to explore the neural basis of aha moment and how people would be able to, how the brain is processing the aha moment. That's an interesting question. And these are basically the last 2 studies I'm going to present you in the session today, discussing about how the aha moment is being processed in the brain. There is a publication in PLOS Biology by a group, it's called Mark Beeman and John Conius. John Conius is from Drexel University in Philadelphia, and Mark Jung Bean. Right now he's mainly using the name of Mark Beeman, and he's from Northwestern University. Northwestern is in Chicago, so both of them are really good universities. Probably Northwestern is even more, let's say, prestigious university than Drexel. And both of them are really good universities. Drexel is in Pennsylvania. So these 2 guys, the first and last authors of this work, they put together a study exploring the time course of presenting a problem, being prepared for that, and finding solution. They realize when people find the solution, if we mark here, the process of finding the solution is associated with activations on the right side, not on the left, okay, during what they called insight. And inside, they call aha movement as insight. I'm not sure it is the best terminology for finding solution in aha moment, because insight is being used in some other let's say, purposes. We use insight in psychiatry mainly for, let's say, self-awareness and those type of concepts. But I mean, probably this is not something that people are using frequently in the field. I should say, let's say, a creative solution. In the insight problem solving, they have higher activation in an area which is located here, which they named it as something like an area in the superior temporal sulcus. You know the anatomy. This is the superior temporal sulcus. This study has been done in 2004. So, to be honest, with the current standards of brain imaging studies, probably these activations would not survive the current thresholds that people are expecting in terms of the quality in the field. But it is just something like the initial studies. And even if I go back to the kind of the previous things that I showed you from the Nagavi study, these type of meta-analysis, they have been good for 2005, but right now you cannot publish any meta-analysis with this quality. So it is, people are using lots of different methods right now. It is not the best way to do that. So in the field of kind of cognitive neuroscience, we have huge amount of advances in a way that some things that has been published in 2004, they probably could not be accepted in the field right now in 2020. So it is the standards are quite higher right now. As soon as people can find the problem here there is a significant activation in the spectral analysis in EEG in an area which is exactly the same area that we saw before, which was the right superior temporal sulcus here. This is the right side. And this, in the spectral analysis, this is between something like 32 to something like 60 hertz to between 30 to 60 hertz. So this is the activation that they have in the spectral analysis over the time. And this one is gamma hertz, gamma band. So there is a gamma band activation right after finding the solution, okay? Which is reasonable. We have usually kind of gamma activations when we are in a high load of information and we are processing things that are complex. But the more interesting part is this part, that before finding the solution, so we are talking about something that's happening before, there is a significant activation in between something like 7 to 13 hertz, which is the alpha frequency band. Okay, here we go. In the occipital areas, in the back of the head. Do you know that when do we have alpha band in the back of the head in EEG? When we close our eyes, but we are still awake and we are relaxing, at that period of time you have a significant alpha activation in the occipital cortex. So it's interesting that before solving the problem with the insight or the creative, those problems are being solved by this process. They had an activation before solving the problem in the alpha band in the occipital cortex, and that is surprising and it's quite interesting. So just to summarize what we have, when they solve the problem, right after solving the problem, there is a significant, let's say, activation in the gamma band here, but right before there is an activation in the alpha frequency band. People might say that, okay, there could be different kind of, let's say, explanation for that, why people have that. But it's quite interesting that it's kind of quite frequently people can see that let's say, alpha activations here before solving the problem. And then they have done another study, as you can see here, the same group, Conius, Beeman, 2006. And they showed that when they have these, let's say, solving the problem with the insight or non-insight ways. These are the areas that they have activation in fMRI before solving a problem with the insight mode compared to non-insight. So as you can follow the color of those lines, the activation in these areas. So this graph is showing the activation in this area. This graph is showing the activation in this area. This graph is showing the activation, and this one. As you can see in all these graphs, the insight is higher than non-insight. So these areas are areas that they have higher activation in insight compared to the non-insight kind of problem-solving solutions. And when you see these areas, what are the networks that are involved here? So if you want to put these areas in one of these Yo-Atlas networks, which network you think that is involved? This is posterior cingulate cortex. Posterior cingulate cortex. Okay? This one is, as you can see here, this one is this part of anterior cingulate ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Okay? And these parts, as you can see here, these are basically these parts. So as you can see, all these three areas on the right or left, right one, left one. So all these four areas are reflected in default mode network. So you have activation in DMN prior to problem presentation predicts whether they solve the problem with sudden insight or not. And that is quite an interesting experience. In terms of, it seems that if you want to solve a problem, you need to have your default mode network going on. And as soon as you have the problem solved, then you can shift to executive control network to be able to bring out what you have extracted and make a plan for it and do it and make it done. So you can find the solution here and you can get the solution done here in the executive control network. So you need the executive control network to get the problem, the solution done. But to find the solution, you need to use your default mode network. And then you can imagine what could be the implications of these findings in terms of we need people who are able to have both their DMN and ECN working perfectly well, and they need to be able to shift them to each other. How people can get deep into the DMN and then get to the ECN network, and how they can shift between these networks. And shifting between these networks is quite an interesting process in terms of how people can shift these networks together, and that could be an interesting implication. And I can get back to the kind of the things that I was discussing about before, how running could be one of those experiences that could get you into the DMN, and how can you kind of, when you find the solution, how you can be also executive to perform and get the solution done. So this is the end of the last part. And there are specific implications, as you can imagine, even for, let's say, those who are executives, those who are they need to be entrepreneur, they need to be problem solvers, they need to be creative. How having an understanding about these networks and how these networks are being activated and how these networks are being shifted to each other is going to be critically important, and it could be exciting. Those who are interested to know more about that, John and Mark, they have published a paper in 2014 about these, kind of reviewing those things together in an annual review of psychology, which is a really pretty prestigious journal. Has something like Impact Factor, something like 20, and you can find that and read that. Thank you very much for your attention. It was great to have you here in the session 6. Looking forward to see you in the next session next week. Have a good day.